I would like to share with you a couple of observations which I have obtained, especially in the last 15 years, in my capacities in uniforms and in the last 3 years as a civilian, 9 months in Washington, D.C., as a research fellow in the Washington Institute for News Policy, in the last 2 years here in Israel. If I have to sum up in a nutshell what is the main challenge for the state of Israel, I would say it is still the reluctance of too many parties in the region to recognize our right to exist as a Jewish independent state. Unfortunately, it is not so clear, talking about our political discourse and our public discourse, and it affects the international political discourse as well. I found that in the last 15 years, we told ourselves a story that the problem is 1967, and in order to reach peace and tranquility, we just have to give up Judea and Samaria and the Gaza Strip, or to return to the 67 borderlines. It is one of misconceptions which dominates our political discourse as well as international discourse. And actually our policy today, trying to reach any kind of agreements or to go to further unilateral steps like we did 3 years ago in the Gaza Strip, unilateral withdrawals, with a strong belief that this is the way to reach peace and tranquility based on either the peace for land formula or the two states solution, it is a deception to myself. I found it when I was head of the intelligence, at the peak of Oslo in 1995, when I found that in the Oslo agreement, Arafat was not ready to recognize our right to exist as a Jewish independent state. And this is the case today with Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, which we perceived him, according to our public discourse, political discourse, as a moderate. Mahmoud Abbas was not ready to conclude Annapolis Conference with a declaration that Israel and the Palestinian Authority are going to negotiate any kind of peace agreement, even a shared agreement, based on the two states for two peoples formula. And they rejected the expression two peoples. You can't quote any Palestinian leader or Arab leader since the dawn of Zionism saying, I'm ready to recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish independent state. Yes, you might quote them saying, I recognize Israel, but we have to resist it. Mahmoud Abbas says it. Mukawama, resistance, either an armed resistance or a political resistance. Mukawama siyasiya, a political resistance. When I questioned Oslo, when I was head of the intelligence, of course, I was offended by the politicians. And I found that the lie about Oslo is so dominating the Israeli public discourse that it is very difficult to explain to people who live there. Looking to the nature of the threat to the state of Israel, we can talk about two major shifts. we have just concluded a military operation in the Gaza Strip, which demonstrates the two major shifts, the two major changes in the nature of the threat to the State of Israel and the ideology which generates this threat. The first change is moving from the conventional type warfare to either sub-conventional or super-conventional. Since 1948, till Yom Kippur War, 1973, the I.D.F. main challenge was the Arab armed forces, fighting the Arab armed forces. Since Yom Kippur War, 35 years ago, the preferable battlefield is not anymore conventional, in which armed forces are engaged in the battlefield. Armor, infantry, artillery, air force, navy, and so forth. It's either sub-conventional or super-conventional. Sub-conventional, it's terror, guerrilla, and rockets. And super-conventional, missiles, Syrian Scuds, Iranian Shihabs, or weapons of mass destruction. Syrian chemical warhead, Iranian chemical warhead, and the Iranian determination to acquire military and nuclear capability. Why did they move from the conventional to the sub and the super-conventional battlefields? First of all, because they were defeated in the conventional battlefield. But secondly, the second reason is more important to our discussion. They believe that the weakest link in our national security chain is the ability of the Israeli society to stand. They believe that the Israeli society, as a Western society, as a society of plenty, is very sensitive, of course, to casualties. But more than that, they believe that the Israeli society is looking for good life and is not ready to fight anymore, and not talking about sacrificing life even for its defense. And they believe that they found the key how to eliminate the State of Israel in an attrition-type warfare consists of terror, rockets, targeting deliberately our civilians, and this is the idea. Homicide bombing attacks in our cafes, restaurants, public transportation. Rockets. They can easily target military installations around the Gaza Strip. Hezbollah could have been targeting military installations in the north. The preferable targets are our cities, our communities, our civilians. And they believe that by doing it in an attrition-type warfare, they might weaken our willingness to live in a Jewish state here in the land of Israel. The second major shift is in ideologies. At the very beginning of Zionism, the reaction of the Arabs here was a national Arab ideology not to allow a Jewish entity here. The idea of keeping this area purely Arab. And after the creation of the State of Israel, we faced certain ideologies which were national Arab ideologies, like Nasserism, named on Gamal Abdel Nasser, president of Egypt. Ba'athism, which still exists in Syria. Pan-Arabism, the idea of having Arab coalition to fight against the State of Israel. In 1979, it has been changed dramatically. And 1979 is a very significant year in the history of the Middle East. On that year, in one hand, we signed the peace accord with Egypt. It was the end of Pan-Arabism. national Arab ideologies lost their dominance, their hegemony in the region. And on the same year, the Iranian Revolution occurred in Tehran. The success of the Iranian Revolution, in which for the first time for centuries, the Shias in Iran succeeded in creating an Islamic republic led by the Islamic law, Sharia. It was a source of inspiration for jihadists all over